G'day, I'm Mick Olsen, and over the years I've developed a fascination with the rich history of the desert areas of Australia, both Indigenous history and the brave hardy souls who went to explore that country at the turn of the century. That's brought us to Fowlers Bay today, on the coast of South Australia, about 180 kilometres to the west of Ceduna. Not much here these days. It's a fishing community and a holiday community, but it's also the jumping off spot for many of the explorers in the 18th century, using it as a staging post for their expeditions. Ernest Giles, Edward John Eyre, Peter Edgar Warburton, and of course the reason we're here is for Richard Thelwell Maurice, who in 1902 staged one of his largest expeditions from here. In late April, he and 4 others, 12 camels, set off from Fowlers Bay to move across Australia to arrive at Wyndham in the Kimberley some 3 months later. For us, we hope to retrace as faithfully as we can that route, departing from here on this morning. We're at Maralinga in the Great Victoria Desert. This village was built to support the British and Australian atomic testing in the 1950s and 60s. About 40 kilometres away in the blast area is also the site of Tetkin's Wells, which were built by Harry Tetkins in the 1870s after he'd passed through here in a particularly good season and had thought it was good grazing country. Maurice was headed here as his first port of call because it was the last known point of contact and source of water, that and the nearby Paling Rock Hole. That's where we'll be heading off to start our journey on the quads.
These people, and they would have loved it.
We're at the Maralinga airstrip. This entire site was surveyed in 1954 by Len Bedell. They started work here in 1955 and they finished it 16 months later in 1956. That was a site that housed thousands of workers and provided an airstrip 3 kilometres long. It was a feat that I don't think you'd be able to repeat these days with modern unionism and the likes. But quite incredible. All of the aluminium structure behind us was prefabbed in England and sent out and flown into the site.
From that area.
So they're
Illawarra, Naya, Nawa Junction, Murpoo. These names actually come from that, from Papua New Guinea. The British servicemen, when they were out here building and that, and setting up the bomb sites and all that, the scientists, whoever was the boss at the time, they got to name the area. And they got to name the bomb sites and that, you know.
Now, Paling Rock Hole, that's a TO place?
Yeah. Very, very sacred site, and we aren't allowed to let anybody go out there. It's significant.
Full of sand now, so.
And it's not called Pilling, it's actually Paling.
Okay,
But, yeah, Paling Rock Hole.
Yeah.
It's not Pilling Rock Hole.
Maralinga is also a home to a rich history, a rich exploration history that is deeper than just the atomic testing of the 50s and 60s. And this is one of those sites. In 1874, Harry Tetkins, a well-known explorer in his own right, passed through here with Edward Eyre. They were doing research for pastoral, looking for pastoral land. 1874 was a very good year for rain, and when they came through here the place was very green, lush and chock-a-block full of wildlife. In 1878 Tetkins returned thinking and hoping to establish a pastoral lease here, one of the conditions of which was having permanent water on site. In 1878 he shanghaied 2 poor Russian sailors and brought them up here, left them for 9 months with rudimentary supplies to dig 2 wells, and this is the first one, Tetkins 1. They got down 27 metres and found very brackish water before Tetkins took them back down to Fowlers Bay. Maurice passed through here in 1902, but knowing the water was not potable, kept on heading up to Paling Rock Hole, which is another 15 or 20 kilometres further north of here.
And they'd shoot 20 rockets up at a time. They were set on Mack trucks, so they were placed around strategic positions around in a half circle. These are all in a line here at different angles. And
after a great day of exploring the rich history of Maralinga and the Atomic Test Range, we headed east on 1st Avenue and camped in the bush some kilometres south of Paling Rockhole. In the morning, an eerie mist covered the land and brought an all-pervading chill with it. We had to wait for a couple of hours for the mist to clear before heading east along 1st Avenue to reach Nala Junction and the Emu Road. From there we headed north to a point where Maurice's route intersected the Emu Road, and this is where our quad expedition following the route would begin. From our jump-off point at Maralinga, the route of 1902's Maurice expedition will guide us into the dunes and mulga plains of the Great Victoria Desert. It's nearly 114 years to the day since camel and man first walked this route, but despite this we'll be endeavouring to identify features described by Bill Murray and Richard Maurice as we progress. Through their camps 2 till 10 we will trek 180 kilometres to Tallaringa, where we will meet our support crew to replenish supplies before continuing. From Tallaringa, our expedition will follow Maurice's trail across incredibly harsh country that is largely devoid of water and animal life to reach the Everard Ranges, some 400 kilometres and 7 days to our north. We've reached our jumping off point on the Emu Road now. Paling Rockhole's back this way, about 7 kilometres, and Maurice headed off on basically a north-easterly direction up here for the next 4 days. So we're going to get the quads off the trailer now and the adventure really begins. This first afternoon on the quad saw us crossing a combination of sand dunes and open mulga country. It was pretty dusty work as we headed on towards Maurice's Camp 5, where at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after 4 hours and 40 kilometres, we decided to call it a day and set up camp. We're at Maurice's Camp 5 and about to leave. Just getting prepped up in the morning. Day 2 would see us continue to follow Maurice's route through camps 6 and 7 and also search for the Carnadina native well, a well that hadn't been seen since Maurice's report in 1902. Carnadina was a native well visited by Maurice in 1902 but found to be dry. It's not been seen since that visit, and one of the key reasons is a discrepancy in the coordinates for the site. Murray's recorded latitude is much higher than the location shown on today's maps, but after a good search we did find a possible candidate location, but in all reality Carnadina native well remains position approximate. The countryside opened up significantly during the morning, and we found ourselves negotiating wide grassy plains and open mulga woodlands. The high lineal dunes often provided an excellent vantage point to survey the country ahead. Maurice's Camp 9 had been our objective for the day's travel. This is where Maurice commenced his push north towards Tallaringa. With a few hours left in the day and still having a bit of energy left, we decided to push on through a series of ribbon lakes and salt flats to try and reach Tallaringa. After a long day in the saddle and with the weather threatening, we reached Tallaringa a full day ahead of schedule. Found by Maurice on his second attempt at locating it in 1902, Tallaringa was one of the rare sources of permanent water in the region, and large groups of Aboriginal people would congregate here as a result. Murray reported finding the remains of hundreds of native camps in the surrounding dunes. At the time of their visit, the well was producing plentiful water at a depth of 15 feet, and they took the opportunity to rest the camels and explore the surrounding countryside for 5 days. Tallaringa was rediscovered by Len Bedell in 1951 while grading the central line out from the Woomera rocket base. Evidence of both the original inhabitants and the camps of those that followed can still be found in the area.
It was dry when we arrived. It will certainly be full in the morning. What you can hear is unexpectedly about 2 or 3 inches of rain falling in a very short period of time. It's very, very wet and we're all sheltered under the only tarp we've got and hoping that it clears tomorrow. But it certainly put a damper on things. Just coming off our roof. We're all sort of under this little tarp. This is our world. It's a very small one at the moment. And I just hope you can swim. Morning after the deluge. It's clearing. Our rudimentary tarp there that we set up last night. So this is what we huddled under last night. A lot of us caught quite a lot of water and refilled, restocked all our water containers. That's how much rain fell overnight. So probably just over an inch.
Now we've got some heat on it. Good.
The rain eased during the early morning, and although we emerged into a gloomy day, the process of drying things out was aided by the ever-improving weather and the prevailing wind. It allowed us to spend some time checking the quads, making necessary repairs to equipment, and exploring the local area with the support crew, before we returned to camp and got the quads packed in preparation for our departure tomorrow on what would be the most isolated and difficult leg of our Maurice expedition. Stage 2 of our journey will take us from Maurice's Camp 10 at Tallaringa north through the dunes of the Great Victoria Desert to reach the next known water at Ullerina, some 260 kilometres away. From there it's a further 100 kilometres to reach the Everard Range and a native well known as Wollurga.
This is Camp 12, second day for Maurice north of Tallaringa.
morning tea stop for us.
It had been a cold, overcast morning, the relentless wind driving the cold into us even further as we crossed the dunes and laterite plains. After lunch, we reached the edge of the laterite country and headed back into the dunes. The wind had been growing steadily in strength all day until it was absolutely howling, adding an extra chill factor for we riders. With the weather improving in the afternoon, the overcast morning broke apart into cumulus clouds, all being driven by the fearsome wind of the afternoon. Keeping an eye on the map, we identified a spot where two high dunes met, forming a V-shape. We figured the location may provide protection from the relentless wind. Arriving at 3 p.m, we were pleased to confirm our assumptions and find a sheltered site to camp. We soon had the tent set and a fire roaring, the one advantage of so much dead mulga lying about. Day 7 dawned cold and clear. It was to be a day of twisting and turning over sand dunes and laterite plains, with some interesting finds along the way and a mishap or two to keep things interesting.
Does seem to be a problem here. Mick's found a smooth road that he wants to put a hole in it. Down here seems to be the problem. The spring has got a bend in it.
Yeah.
Because the shocker
It's buggered.
is broken at the top. There we are. The job is done.
Yeah, voila. Standard shot going back on.
He's now joined the dark side as
I'll
the
be leaning.
black shocker spring.
The only good thing about this is I will still be right leaning. I'd hate to be leaning to the left. Larry wouldn't talk to me.
That's right. And Larry thinks we've only lost about 2 laps. Pretty right.
Couldn't get him back. Done it before.
Yeah.
This is Camp 13, or as near as I can put it. There's not much here. Just come back into the dunes. The boys have gone down to check out a small creek line to see if that's going to be worth camping at. That's where we are on the map for 13.
Day 8 dawned bright but chilly. It brought with it the normal morning chores, as well as a visitor. Our route today will see us head northwest for some 15 kilometres, before spearing off sharply west to reach a confluence at 28 degrees south, 133 degrees east. From there, we'll head northeast for approximately 12 kilometres to re-reach Maurice's route in the vicinity of Camp 31, the site of Castor Khan's defection, before then resuming our route towards Olorina. Morning tea break. A full morning's travel of 4.5 hours saw us arrive at our confluence site.
So mix that in talk.
Confluence, 3 cheers for the king. Hurrah!
Hooray!
What are we, 133? No.
28. 133.
28, 133 confluence. A little bit off our track.
And
We're right there. It's it.
Nobody's been here before.
And I can tell you why, because it's at the arse end of the universe. It's taken us 3 days to get here.
With flies.
With flies.
Several kilometres along our return leg, we found the remains of an old campsite. The tyre tracks were extremely old, the depressions long filled with drifting sand. Just who they were and what they were doing way out here will always remain a matter of conjecture. At times the country appeared to be carpeted and green, but this was quite deceptive. Plant life was still sparse and only provided a brief respite from the challenging hummocks and gnarly scrub of the dune country.
We're in the vicinity of Camp 14, and it was here on the 22nd of May that Maurice and Murray became aware that their Afghan cameleer, Castor Khan, had absconded with Mr. Maurice's best riding camel, and they presumed to be heading east towards Unadada, about 150 miles that way. That left them in a bit of predicament, one down, but he apparently hadn't taken any supplies with him. So on finding that they had little chance of following him up, they decided to head on to Olorina, which was around about 30 miles to our north.
15 kilometres north of Camp 14, we struck a dilapidated old fence, the southernmost evidence of pastoral efforts in the region. The hand-augured wooden posts were a testament to skills long lost since the advent of the star picket. With the sun creeping under the brims of our hats, we judged the day fairly done and set up camp in a corridor between large dunes. This was quickly followed by the nightly maintenance checks and effecting any necessary repairs to the quads. It's been an interesting but gruelling day across rough desert country. Thursday, the 12th of May, dawned brisk but sunny, with all of our tents and equipment soaked by the heavy overnight dew. The early morning light added a vibrancy to the bush and sandhills around us. Pushing the heavily laden quads through such harsh terrain over the past days meant fuel was becoming an issue for us. With some of the worst dunes yet ahead of us, the next 30 kilometres travel to the Katu Hills and Olorina Bore will be influenced by fuel conservation and may well influence our route further north. Despite their ruggedness and terrain tackling ability, our quads are not infallible, and with the dunes increasing in height as we pushed north, not even the dew-dampened sand could help us in climbing some of these monsters. The Maurice expedition with their 14 heavily laden camels were often forced to climb these dunes obliquely because they were simply too steep and the sand too soft for the camels to ascend them. Even our modern day mechanical camels struggled at times.
Let's go find a better spot to cross, I think.
Crossing 3 large sandhills, we reached flat laterite country that was thick with scrubby acacia, and soon came upon a thin ribbon of rock jutting from the earth. While standing only 30 to 60 centimetres high, this outcrop was the first stone of note we had seen so far on the trip. Without realising it, this was the first indication of difficulties to come.
Hit a bit of a halt to proceedings. Some rocky country we weren't expecting. Makes it a bit hard to get through.
A barely perceptible rise in the countryside meant we gained a fair degree of height, and as the country became rockier and the creeks more pronounced, it dawned on us that we were climbing the back of a range of hills. This was never more apparent than when we found our way forward blocked by a precipitous drop. What we had thought to be gentle creeks were now rugged gorges with sheer walls of 30 metres. Only 4 kilometres distant, our destination was tantalisingly close, the pristine salt pans shimmering in the distance, but alas, it was impossible to navigate further on the quads, so a tactical retreat was called upon. We retreated south to the broad back of the range and then pushed west, descending along its back until it brought us down to the sand. From one location we got our first glimpse of the Everard Ranges, blue and distant. Although we were perched a bit higher than Maurice's party had been, it wasn't hard to identify the sandhills they might have stood upon on the 22nd of May 1902. Reaching the dunes once again, we crossed the last 5 kilometres north towards Ullerina, locating several small clay pans holding water from the recent rains, before reaching that broad samphire pan that heralded our arrival at Ullerina. There was a small group of camels there to greet us, but little else to add extra character to this dark place. Ullerina was the southernmost water source for pastoral efforts in the region, and the large windmill stands out from the surrounding sandhills. As we can attest, the country south of here soon becomes too tough for even the hardiest of animals. The Soak area was a principal source of water for the Aboriginal people, and a key stopping point on their migratory path from the Everard Ranges south down to the Maralinga lands. Arriving on May 23, 1902, Maurice's party spent a total of 9 nights at the location recuperating and getting conditioned back onto the camels. The harsh condition and poor feed of the past weeks had stripped condition from many of the animals, and the good feed and water around Ullerina was a welcome respite.
From here they spent 7 days, and Maurice headed out on a camel, believing a young blackfellow who'd wandered into camp indicated that he'd seen a camel further north towards Dalkenham. So Maurice and Mungina headed off after him and to see if they could track him down, but they had little luck and returned after 4 days, during which time Murray tended to the camels, the journals and the likes, and waited for their return.
Ullerina bears the ravages of excessive grazing, and I'm sure it bears little resemblance to the area visited by Maurice in 1902. The soak was replaced by a well and finally a bore and windmill that provisioned a large tank and troughs. The detritus of 80 years, old windlasses, machinery and polypipe litters the area. The windmill head appeared serviceable, and with the fitting of a pump to the bore casing below, may still be capable of producing water. Larry, as our qualified bore mechanic, climbed the structure to check its condition and also gained some excellent views of the surrounding country. With our fuel reserves getting low, we opted to utilise existing tracks which would take us north before veering west and closely following Maurice's route to the Everards. As this country has been handed back to the traditional owners, the properties have been destocked and the infrastructure left to the elements. Yards, bores and fences are fast deteriorating, as are the tracks that join them. The bores no longer provide life-giving water, so people don't stray too far from their communities. It seems a shame that such infrastructure has been let go to ruin, but such is the way of the desert. From Wildcat Bore, we continue to Parakeelia Bore and its magnificent cattle yard, before veering to the north towards Sandy Bore, our excitement mounting as the approaching mountains grew bigger. 15 kilometres further north, we veered from the track to parallel Maurice's route, pushing through thick acacia towards Taddy Peak and the site of Maurice's Camp 18, where we too set up camp in a thick scrub. Friday the 13th may be unlucky for some, but not for us. We got to ride through the unique landscapes of the majestic Everard Range, exploring its wonders. The first European to sight and name the range was Ernest Giles on the 30th of August 1872. While only seen distantly from the north, Giles named them the Everard Ranges after a benefactor's cattle property, Everard Park. The Everards are actually a long range of domed monoliths or Bornhards, running east-west for a distance of 15 kilometres. Many are covered in jumbles of sentinel-like boulders. In geological terms, the range is similar to Ayers Rock and the Olgas, and rich in caves and overhangs alive with Aboriginal rock painting galleries. Over thousands of years, the country was a haven for the Indigenous people, and the numerous sources of semi-permanent water sustained many of the early expeditions and hardy souls who passed this way throughout the 19th century. Today our paths would cross those of great explorers such as Giles, Lindsay and Maurice, and like them, we would marvel at this amazing country. While Maurice's party had taken a circular route to Taddy Peak and onwards to Mount Carmina, our low fuel supplies dictated a straight line route around the western flank of Etelarina Hill and Mount Carmina and into the open country to their north. The riding was simply spectacular as we twisted through mulga and acacia woodlands and across broad plains, skirting the rugged domes. We made good time as we curved around the hills and onto the northeasterly bearing towards Mount Ilbely. Mount Ilbely is the highest point in a range that is broken by countless valleys and gorges. The Briscoe Creek originates in a broad valley between the northern slopes of Ilbely and a lesser ridge to its north. Broad and open at its western end, the valley narrows significantly towards Mount Barnett, the easternmost point of the range. Our route took us around the eastern end of Ilbely and into the Briscoe Creek. The ranges are spectacular, and every single valley invited you to ride into it and explore. Majestic gum-lined creeks promised the reward of waterholes for those willing to seek them out. Having a lunch below Mount Ilbely, we could clearly see the trig point on the summit, to which Maurice had climbed in 1902. Exploring the lower foothills, we found many of the crevasses and deeper pools still contained water from the recent rains. Immediately after lunch, we continued east along the valley to the narrowest point, where it is no more than 100 metres wide. This was to be our easternmost point in our travels, and from here we traced Maurice's route back to the west, around the hills and onto a north-northwesterly bearing to the site of another native soak where the party had camped on the 6th of June 1902 and recorded by Maurice as Wallalurga. Some 9 kilometres across the plains, 3 rocky domes protrude from the sandy soil. 50 metres high and covering a square kilometre, the domes provide a series of sheltered gullies. Sloping gradually to the northeast, the runoff from the hard granite surface forms creeks and encourages a dense fringe of scrub. While plenty of water remained in crevices and shallow pools on the rocky surface of the domes, we were unable to pinpoint the exact location of the native soak Maurice recorded. We did locate an excellent campsite in a small sheltered valley, and it wasn't hard for us to imagine that Maurice had made a similar decision all those years ago. The domes provided an excellent vantage point to watch the late afternoon sun play against the expanse of the Everard Range, now lying to our south. Tired and dirty, yet elated, dinner by the campfire brought the opportunity to reflect on an amazing journey across 600 kilometres of harsh yet incredible country, and to marvel at the exploits and resilience of those hardy men who first explored these lands.